Hi, folks. Hi, folks. Hi, folks. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. Can you hear me in the back? Can anyone in the back hear me? Maybe I didn't turn it on. How about that? Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much. Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us here at Green Apple Books on the Park, celebrating Paul Tran's debut collection, All the Flowers Kneeling. Y'all are doing great already. Extra credit for everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here supporting Paul, and thank you to Sam for coming as well and supporting Paul. I'm Cara, I'm the events coordinator here for Green Apple. I just have a couple of housekeeping things before we get to the real fun part. First, I want to tell you about a couple of upcoming events that we have, or one. I'll stick to one. We have an exciting night ahead. On Friday, February 11th at 7 p.m., right where we are right now, Brian Tierney is going to be joining us to celebrate. Yay, Brian! Today's his publication day as well for his new collection, Rise and Float. Brian will be joined by fellow poets and Green Apple faves, William Brewer, Randall Mann, and Noah Warren. That's going to be this Friday, February 11th at 7 p.m., right where we are right now. We have a full calendar of our events on our website at greenapplebooks.com. And I'm not above it. If you can, please do buy books. Please do buy books from us here. When you buy books from us, you help keep us here. You help support events such as these and the authors who put so much work into writing these books. So only if you can, please do buy books and not from like Amazon or whatever it's called. Thank you so much. Please do thank you to everyone for being so cool about checking proof of X. I know it's like a weird time right now, so I appreciate you being cool about it and being cool with your fellow guests and with our staff here at Books on the Park. Please do keep your masks on for the evening. We're going to give, excuse me, we're going to give Paul and Sam the grace to take theirs off. So we're just trying to be a little safer. Thank you for being cool about it. We're going to have a Q&A at the end of Paul and Sam's time up here. So think about questions throughout. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the writers that are joining us this evening. First, we have Sam. Yeah, all right. Writers joining us this evening. All right, first we have Sam Sachs, who's a queer Jewish poet and educator. They're the author of Bury It, winner of the James Laughlin Award from the Academy of American Poets. Oh, and Madness, there's one more, winner of the National Poetry Series. They're the two-time Bay Area Grand Slam champion with poems published in the New York Times, Poetry Magazine, Granta, BuzzFeed, and elsewhere. They've received fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Poetry Foundation, a Wallace Stegner Fellowship, and Lambda Literary. Currently, they live in Oakland, and they'll be a lecturer at Stanford University this fall. Please do welcome Sam Sachs. Yay! Last but most certainly not least, Paul Tran received their BA in history from Brown University. And I love every shout out for every accolade. Okay. And an MFA in poetry from Washington University in St. Louis, where they were the Chancellor's Graduate Fellow and Senior Poetry Fellow. They've been awarded a 2021 Fellowship in Literature from the National Endowment for the Arts. The Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Fellowship from the Poetry Foundation and the Discovery Boston Review Poetry Prize. Currently a Wallace Stegner Fellow at Stanford University, Paul's work appears in the New Yorker, Poetry, and elsewhere. Their collection, All the Flowers Kneeling, is the reason we are here tonight. Please welcome Paul.
A cute round of applause for Carr. Thank you. I'm delighted to get to introduce Miss Paul Tran on the inaugural debutante ball for her first collection, All the Flowers Kneeling. So let's applaud that real quick. What the show is, I'm just going to say like two things really quickly about how much I love them and their work. They're going to read for 15 minutes. We'll talk. Y'all can ask questions. And then at the end, we'll culminate with a final collective incantation of one of their poems from the collection. And that's going to should it be a surprise or should I tell them in advance so they can prepare?
Girl, you're the teacher.
Okay, so we are going to page 58 will be the poem that we all close out with our collective voices.
Hello, teacher.
So thank y'all for braving an apocalypse to show up in person to celebrate this book launch. Thank y'all for keeping yourself safe online and not coming to this in person and protecting your extended communities. Gosh, there's so much to say about this book. I wrote a whole paragraph, which is a lot for me, who writes in lineated sections. But I've known Paul for about a decade. We met at the Collegiate Poetry Slam in Laverne. I remember exactly what they were wearing. It was like, yeah, fishnets, full-length fishnets, like a long plaid, and just fierce as fuck. Did you wear that to Boulder as well?
Yeah.
Oh no, they weren't wearing that in Laverne. I don't remember. I don't remember what they were wearing when we first met. But there were fishnets.
There were definitely fishnets.
Yes, always fishnets. But I do remember the first poem I heard them read. We were sitting outside, and there was like a big cipher going on, and they whispered this really quiet poem to me about their mom. And this was like a decade ago, and it's a poem that's haunted and beguiled and inspired me ever since. And I mean inspired both in terms of like the control and intake of breath, as well as the sort of moving bodily existential feeling that their poems offer. Over this past decade of sisterhood, learning, grieving, and enjoying next to them has been one of the great privileges of my life. Getting to watch Paul blossom, astound, and explore, and expose through their writing and mentorship, teaching, and dedication to the work of their friends and their community. And this dedication to the writer's art. Their poems have followed this deep journey and curiosity between cities and schools and lifetimes. From Grand Slam champion at the Nuyorican Cafe to mentoring countless generations, both in terms of aesthetics on the page and on the body. Yes, we're all sort of indebted to the tireless work that they do. Whenever there's an assignment, Paul will show up and say, oh, I didn't know there was an assignment, and produce a diamond from their pocket. So when the history of literature and the multi-millennia history of poetry asked Paul to write a book, they said, oh, I didn't know there was an assignment, and then produced this astounding, singular, brilliant volume. So I think it makes sense on this unseasonably warm day that we've all gathered here to celebrate all the flowers kneeling. It's a monumental collection. It's voice-driven and polyvocal. It challenges the reader and invites them in the same breath. I was gonna read your little bio, but you were already fully laureled beforehand. Let's make as much noise as is possible in our tiny, excuse me. Let's make as much noise as possible from our tiny human bodies from here and also at home to welcome to the stage Paul Tran for their debutante ball.
Lipstick elegy. I climbed down to the beach facing the Pacific Ocean, where torrents of rain shore the sand. On the other side, my grandmother sleeps soundlessly in her bed, her aoyai of the whitest silk. My mother knew her mother died long before the telephone rang like bells announcing the last American helicopter leaving Saigon. Arrow shot back to its bow, long distance missile. I know she would fly home if she could. She works overtime instead, curls her hair with hot rollers, rouges her cheeks like Gong Li and Raise the Red Lantern, and I'm her understudy, hiding in the doorways between her grief and mine. I apply her foundation to my face. I conceal all the parts of me that she conceals, puckering my lips as if to kiss a man who would love me the way I want to be loved. And I said, all their bewitching names aloud. Twisted Rose, Fuchsia in Paris, Irreverence. I picked the lipstick she would least approve. wrapped a white towel around my waist, danced for hours in the kitchen, checking my reflection in a charred skillet. I laughed her laugh, the way my grandmother used to laugh when she was alive, when she taught me to pray from the Q-Dai-B, when I braided her hair in the unbearable heat, my tiny fingers weaving each silver strand into a fishtail, a French twist, each knot, another child she never got to name. I'm sorry. Mother of my mother. Immortal Buddha with 1,000 hands, chewing a fist of beetle root, your teeth black as dawn, no child in our family stays a child their mother can love. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It feels so good to be here with you. And the poems in this collection emerged 9 years ago when I was raped in college and had to reckon with the fact that I was molested as a child by my father, had to reckon with the fact that generations of women in my family are also survivors because of the Vietnam War, because of the French Indochina War, and how through it all, they have found ways to continue to persist and to build new lives, even when they could not imagine what those lives could look like. And for that reason, the word rape does not appear in this book. The word trauma does not appear in this book. This is a book about survival. What does it look like? What have we been told it looks like? And how one person, be it a queer and trans descendant of Vietnamese refugees or anyone, how can one person redefine what survival looks like and means on their own terms, in their own words, and for their own purposes? And one of the most difficult questions I had to contend with putting this, not just these poems together, but my life together, was whether or not I was actually invested in my own success and survival. So here it goes. Galileo. I thought I could stop time by taking apart the clock. Minute hand, hour hand. Nothing can keep. Nothing is kept, only kept track of. I felt passing seconds accumulate like dead calves in a thunderstorm of the mind, no longer a mind, but a page torn out from the dictionary with the definition of the word self effaced. I couldn't face it. The world moving on as if nothing happened. Everyone I knew got up, got dressed, went to work, went home. There were parties, ecstasy, Hennessy, dancing around each other. Bluntness, blunts rolled to keep thought after thought from roiling inside me like wind across water. I coerced shapelessness into shape. I put on my best face. I was glamour, I was grammar, yet my best could not best my beast. I too had been taken apart. And I didn't want to be fixed. I wanted everything dismantled and useless like me. Case, wheel, hands, dial, face, which are all parts of a clock. But I had to, I had to get real. There were so many examples of what persistence looked like in my life. My mom came from Vietnam to the United States in 1989, and as a single parent, worked 3 jobs just so that I could be the first in my family to graduate high school and go to college, worked 3 jobs just so I could ask for a Walkman and a school uniform and bus money. And I don't know, even when it felt like there weren't examples, I had art and I had literature and history and movies. And I'll never forget being, in 11th grade, and my teacher, Mr. Smith, put this incredible painting on the screen of Judith slaying Holofernes by Artemisia Gentileschi. And she was an Italian Baroque artist, one of the few women of her time to testify before her rapist in open court. And even though she didn't win, She wins in history because her paintings survived. And in this one instance, she paints the figure Judith from the Bible. And Judith, after her village was invaded and pillaged by soldiers, sneaks into the tent of the general with her maidservant in the middle of the night, and she seduces him. She wears this really great dress, by the way, and she beheads him. And I don't know, when I feel at a loss, I have to remember that there are those women in history, and we stand beside each other. And so this poem takes its voice, borrows its voice from Judith. Judith slaying Holofernes. I know better than to leave the house without my good dress, my good knife, like a crucifix between my stone breasts. My mother would have me whipped for that. She'd have me kneel on rice until I shrilled so loud I rang the church bells. Didn't I tell you? She would remind me that elegance is our revenge, that there are neither victims nor victors, but the bitch we envy. In the end, I am that bitch. I'm so dogged, so damn not even death wanted me. He sent me back after you sacked my body, stacked our headless idols in the river where our children impaled themselves on rocks. I exit night. I enter your tent, gilded in this bolt of stubborn sunlight, my sleeves already rolled up, and I know what they'll say. I'm a slut for showing this much skin, this irreverence for what is seen when I ask to be seen. Look at me. My thigh lifts from your thigh. My mouth spits poison into your mouth. You're the nasty beauty. I'm no beast, but when my blade slices clean through your thick neck, while my maid keeps your blood off me and my good dress, it will be a song the parish sings for centuries. Tell Mary, tell Eve, tell Salome and David about me, and watch all their faces like yours turn green. Last poem, then we'll get into the Q&A, and the discussion, and then the Q&A. I was told in teaching school you have to say everything 3 times. So discussion, Q&A. Discussion, Q&A. Discussion. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, this last poem is where the title comes from. Thank you to my thesis committee, Carl Phillips in particular. I was told throughout graduate school, Paula, you need to learn compression, economy of language, charging every, and I did. But the thesis committee was really, they're like, so why did you turn in this 6-page poem with the 3rd line says itchy clit? And so we spent about 10 minutes talking about that. But I think it redeemed itself in the end. And it's only 4 pages now. So did we learn compression? Yes, we did. But I was in Chicago about to record a live podcast with my sisters, Dana Smith and Franny Choi. And we were about to get into the car, and Franny looks at me and says, are you okay leaving the hotel with your eyebrows like that? And I said, excuse me? And it was the most intimate thing I ever experienced. Someone who loves you, and you just have to trust them, make these things look like sisters and not distant relatives. But it was really intimate to trust someone who saw beauty in me and who said, I'm going to take care of you. Let me do this for you, something that I could not do myself, obviously, clearly. So the poem is about my eyebrows, but it's also about sisterhood, community, compression. Here we go. And it's called the Santa Ana, which is the wind responsible for the Southern California wildfires. And so you know, at the deeper level, the close reading for all my students in the Hello Hi. It is about how sometimes things must be destroyed in order to be reborn, right? Okay, got it, thank you. The Santa Ana. Desert born, wild as corn, head bitch, itchy clit. I throw a fit and meteorologists report rising mercury. My mercury is always in retrograde. I'm neither mercurial nor retro chic. I'm miraculous. Chicken shit, cashing my checks, checking my balance, overdraft, override, OMG, I die every time I'm touched. Everything I touch erupts with flames. Everything got the hots for me, you know? Everything, I'm flamboyant, a witch still burning at the stake. I stake my life on my red dress, redress, retweeted right off the runway. So damn Vogue, I make you dip. Death drop, so gorgeous, I make you drop dead. My winter will outlast Anna Wintour. The only season is me, my sister, her steady hand, her eyes on the sparrows, my eyebrows, plumes she plucks with care. I can't remember anybody ever giving me her face so close to mine. She sees not what I am, she sees what I can be. Symmetry, asymmetry, I know I'm ugly. I have no alibi, but to my chosen family, the family who chose me. I'm the most beautiful bitch in the world. Behold, my bitch face, my bitch hair, my bitch nails, my bitch toenails, my new bitch brows. Who's that bitch? Pop quiz. That bitch. That's me looking at myself for the first time. My sister taking a step back, a step forward, this angle, that angle. This is devotion, attention, revision, precision, a sister assisting her sister in becoming, coming back from the dead, apocrypha, apocalypse. We're the only testament. We are the wind the angels failed to stop from winding through Eden, bitch. You hungry, Sodom, bitch. Look back. Southern California, bitch, take this butter knife to your husband's neck. Haven't you heard us? Howling down the cliffs, swishing our hips into the cajon like a lovesick coyote, all thrash, all ass, deep throat, with lash. We bat our eyes and Los Angeles lights up like a cigarette, ashtray to ashtray, her American spirit, my Newport, the greatest thing, my sister tells me, is being our greatest thing, our greatest wish. My wish, I want to say what happened to me. I want a say in what happens to me. Am I selfish for wanting things to make sense, to matter, to amount in the end to something more than a tally of days and nights of this bitch and her bitches must alone order and reorder heaven, cutting a new cheek, contouring a new nose, lining a new lip, because even the Almighty can be too self-righteous to right their mistakes, ignorant of ignorance. Then we demand the highest seats in heaven. Sorry, not sorry. Game over. LOL. Mary, go round up your little lambs. Nothing is safe for me. Try me. Give me the trial of the century. Give me liberty. Give me Death Valley. I want all the flowers kneeling.
I wasn't even standing up to talk. I thought we were all just doing a standing ovation. I guess that'll happen at the end of the evening. Paula, thank you for reminding us about the power and impact of an in-person poetry reading and how it can both like lift and complicate the spirit and draws you into the language in a different way. That was such a beautiful reading, accompanied by such a beautiful book. I guess the first thing I wanted to ask you is just, you've been working on this book
Yeah.
for a while. You know what I mean? You've been a giant in my eyes in the poetry world, you know, for a while as well. Like, what does it feel like to read out of your book for the first time in front of a bunch of people who adore your writing?
Scary. Yeah. Um, oh no, when I finished writing this book, it felt like I was closing a really long chapter of my life. And during that time, I see it as a mistake now, but it certainly wasn't. There was no other option then, but I saw myself as a rape survivor. That was my identity. But those were the poems people told me I wrote. Those were the poems people, you know, at the worst times told me that I, you know, that was my currency, that I used my trauma to get ahead in life. And, you know, whatever it is that was wanted to be said, but I drew from that pain. And when I finished the book, it felt like I could begin a new life. And I didn't quite know what that new life was going to look like. And I didn't know who else I wanted to be. And I think it was really scary, and it remains so, to stand at the precipice of something new and to know that you want so badly to start over, and to not have any clue what starting over looks like. But I am appreciative of this book and of these poems, because every poem for me starts with a question and it culminates with a kind of lyric discovery, something I did not know about myself or my life. And so they live on in this book as reminders of things I had to learn, of things I had to change about myself, so that when I forget or when I make, you know, the same mistakes or the same bad decisions again, I can go back to the poem and find my way.
Thank you. Yes, good stuff. Laura, you can take notes. Y'all should be taking notes. I feel like it's a gift to be your friend and your student at the same time.
Please send a class evaluation.
Yes, ma'am. My next question is about voice in this book. We heard even today, like 3 different poems that were adjacent to a handful of other sort of inherited voices or narratives or traditions. But I wouldn't say a lot of them are like a traditional persona poem, right? It seems like this book manages to traffic in the space between the voice of the speaker, presumably the author, and like, you know, and these inherited mythologies, these ekphrastic paintings speaking, these scientific subjects speaking. I'm curious about how you think about voice and persona in this book in particular, and how that might differentiate from other kinds of experiences writing in persona you've had.
I want to answer this by saying, for so long, the communities I belong to have been excluded from the category of being human. And so in my poetics, my priority is what I consider the successful importation of a singular person's idiosyncratic interiority onto the page. And the interiority is the inner life of a person, their emotions, feelings, thoughts, ideas, beliefs, biases. Because if I can do that, that's my argument for my humanity. I'm telling someone I have a soul, a heart, a mind, and that makes me human. So, you know, no matter how sophisticated the machinations of oppression are to remove me from my sense of humanity, I make that argument in the poem. And so in the poems where I do borrow the voice of another, be it a rhesus monkey that was experimented upon in the 60s, or, you know, Judith from a biblical story, my endeavor is twofold. One, it's the only way that I can talk about what happened to me directly, through indirection, through asking someone else to step on stage for me. And there is a social contract to that. If I'm going to borrow Judith's voice, I have to give something back to Judith. If I'm going to borrow the voice of a mimosa plant that a French scientist hid away in a closet in 1729 to discover for us that plants have circadian rhythm, I need to give something back to that plant. And so in those poems, I'm exposing dimensions of their story that they never got to speak back to, and I'm exposing dimensions to mine. So for example, there's a scientific method poem about the rhesus monkeys. Those monkeys were separated from their mothers at birth and placed into chambers for 157 days. And in these chambers, some of them were denied food, others were given substitute mothers in the form of dolls made either out of terry cloth, so towels, or out of wire. And out of that experiment, we now know so much about parent-child contact, about attachment, about love. And yet the lives of those monkeys were changed irrevocably. What do I give back to them? A chance for them to speak back to the scientists who pursued those experiments and who pursued those experiments out of his own anxiety about love and out of his own history of lovelessness. Those monkeys could not speak to him. He made those monkeys speak to the experiments he, endeavored. And so in those poems, the social contract is I give them something back if they lend me their time by stepping on stage for me and saying what I could not say for myself. And in the paintings too. And there are other poems.
The Santa Ana Winds.
Well, girl.
Which is your voice and the
Yes.
flames. Yes.
Yes.
Right. It's not for those as well. And take our notes. Okay. All right. So speaking of giving something back, you offer us this formal invention
Ooh,
to
nice.
the future of poetics and literature. You offer us the Hydra, which is an invented form that is 13 lines long. The final line, 13 words, which opens the first lines of the next sequence. This is a book that's filled with, I think, formal invention as well, outside of the named one. I was wondering if you wanted to give, first of all, offer us the chance to write in the form and explain to us what drew you to it, and also, how you think about formal invention and what's in your work.
I mean, I think similar to the last answer, poets like myself, we're asked to prove mastery of poetry. We're asked to prove to others that we know what we're doing. And often we are reduced to our story, right? What can people learn from our diverse stories? And I wanted to assert the fact that throughout time, poets of color have been inventors and innovators. Just thinking about in this country, how Phyllis Wheatley published her first book of poems in 1773, 3 years before Thomas Jefferson even had the idea to unroll that parchment on which he wrote the Declaration. And so through time, we have been inventing and making it possible for each other to exist. And so in this book, one of my assignments in grad school was to invent a poetic form that better mirrored and enacted my own experience. And that lesson taught for me how there's an interior imperative to form. It's not just decorative in poetry, whether we're learning about how rhyme works, how meter works, or how the image works, we cannot use it for mere decoration. It has to be an expression of that single person's interiority. And so in this form, is it cool if I read the last two sections? No. Okay. 56 and 57. 56 and 57. Okay. Wow, it's like reading Rainbow. And obviously Rainbow because queers. Okay. Bloomed after decades dormant, after dryness and heat, after the rainfall blurred the atmosphere, the desert a sea of gold and pink and purple, let sprout. Let butterflies and bees and hummingbirds, let this desert gold, this gravel ghost, this golden evening primrose, this photograph of notched leaf Phycelia rising 3 feet high from a bed of stone show the way, show salt flats and sand dunes and rock, show faith that a moment can be a monument, that the monumental can be this momentary. Human was I who came back and still took for granted the abundance nature made known to me. prince's plume, magnificent lupine. My suffering is that I try to make my suffering beautiful. And I'm no beauty. I'm told that nature's an allegory in which the ego hides, like the dark throat shooting star. Cruelest was I who crossed Death Valley to the valley of life. By my own invention, I found a way. I'm no artifact between art and fact, I. And so the last line in this section is 13 words. Invention, I found a way. I'm no artifact between art and fact, I. And in the next section of the poem, which is 13 lines, those words are the respective first words. And so this invented form, it reimagines the tradition of the sonnet crown, and the sestina. And for the nerds and non-poetry nerds in the room, the sonnet is a 14-line poem that typically ends on a conclusive couplet that reaches for epiphany, revelation, certitude. And so by only having 13 lines, I'm trying to push against the idea that epiphany happens. Sometimes we don't find anything. And then in the sonnet crown tradition, the last line of one section is the first line verbatim of the other, which can represent the clean, neat importation of one lesson from one experience to another. But here we're not doing that. We break up those words, and we're letting those words initiate each of the first lines in the next section as a way of saying, you know, sometimes I don't carry these lessons cleanly over, but I did learn them. And they do, in fact, inform how I live my life. They do, in fact, haunt in the background, but they're not as neat, right? It allows, you know, for the capaciousness of making mistakes, of learning again. And in the tradition of the sestina, there are these end words that are repeated throughout the poem. And that, for a lot of poetry, rhyme in particular, we move towards a known end, right? I got this word, I need to rhyme with this word. It's gonna rhyme eventually, you know, at the end. And so we move from unknown to known. But that wasn't my experience as a survivor. I knew what happened to me. I did not know what life was gonna look like. And so I needed a form that moved from the known to the unknown, which is what this does. The words are at the beginning, and you have to figure your way towards the end. And so the last section simply goes, invention slid into my mind tonight like a formal feeling, just as I slid into my bodysuit. It was August again. Found in my purse was a boarding pass. And there I was, looking through a telescope in the fog-covered field as someone drew closer. Way in the distance, the stars appeared, still fixed, still luminous. I'm going to be far from my pain one day. I'm going to no longer feel that pain, but something new and just as merciless. Artifact of the past, artifice of the future. There I was in the tall grass between the choices I'd made and the choices I was given. The fog's ambivalent art made it so that I saw only what was in front of me. And no matter what drew closer, the stranger in the field or the field itself, fact or fiction, my need or my desire, I had to focus on what I could see. I see not stars, but their light reaching across the distance between us. Woo. We're inventing, we're making.
What a stirring description of formal invention having an embodied necessity to
Yes.
it. Yeah,
Yes.
beautiful.
Why else would it matter?
So I've got
Write it down.
you can snap for it as well. So I got a handful more questions, but I think it might be time to open it up to the audience. Yeah, folks. If folks have questions for Paul, now it's your chance.
Okay, let's see. We said it 3 times.
Okay.
We did our part.
Now,
I think.
questions for Paul. Now is your chance.
How much is the book?
Ooh, okay, In the United States, it's $18. In Canada, it's 24. Yeah, thank you. A planted question. Yes.
I loved your reading because I feel like sometimes I go to readings and I forget the sonic quality of poems and I spend a lot of time reading them. Really curious how you balance it, like how you follow the sound in a poem when you write, or like what that role plays. Great.
Yes. Extra credit for Caitlin, my 11th house student. What is it? Extra credit. I mean, I was taught that sonnets, hello, I'm a teacher with Brett Lever. I was taught that sonnets belong to the larger category of phonic echo. And when phonic echo occurs in a poem, there has to be a reason for the sonic and there has to be a semantic reason. The words relate to each other in some sort of way. And so in my poems where the sounds build up and where they concatenate, there's something building and rising in the speaker themselves. And when the poem flattens, it reflects the quietness of that own speaker. In the writing process, I love to follow sound because it's a way of getting myself out of the way. And it's a way of, in her essay Against Sincerity, Louise talks about self-annulment, and it's a way of self-annulling, of seeing what my mind will think if I'm not leading myself, and then if I'm letting language lead me. There's a sonic crown in the book, and in section 7, for a long time I was trying to figure out, okay, the line goes, something, something, swan in a lake. And I was like, and the poem's in terza rima, and so, for other nerds, Dante's Inferno, Divine Comedy, ooh, ah. And so I had to find a rhyming word for lake, and I was like, cake, bake, make. And then one day in the shower, I just thought rage. C-A-K-E-R-A-G-E. It relies on that A sound, but it's slant. And that provoked something for me. How was I going to get from the swan in a lake to the declaration of rage? And when I could find my way there in the poem, it allowed me to say something to myself, which was that in all those years of thinking I was the victim, I had all this rage in me. That was my fuel to overcome circumstance, to change my life. And I never admitted that to myself. I thought that I was fueled by redemption, by the triumphant narrative. That word that came out of a desire for sonnets allowed me to access something that I had been avoiding. And so I see that as part of it too. Again, not to use any of these devices as mere decoration, but as a way of unlocking to ourselves truer things that we might not have known.
Yeah, and you really hear that in the Santa Ana poem. It's like a poem driven by a sonic sensibility that royals in its own pleasure. And its pleasure.
And it's destructive too,
Yeah.
like the wind. Like, yeah, sure, maybe this person will get all the flowers kneeling, but why do they even want that? What do they get out of it? Just as the fire, yeah. Yes, birds. Birds.
Any other questions from?
Yes.
Paul, I'm wondering, like, in the descriptions you're giving us of the work, there's like so much richness that some of us who aren't trained to read, like, wouldn't read off the page.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, like, what your relationship is to that and how you want your audience to engage with how you constructed these poems and how much you want them to know about that or not. Like, is it important to you?
Yes. Also not a planted question. I love this question. I was taught that a poem should teach you how to read it and a book should teach you how to read it. And so in the way that I constructed this book, even if you're not like a poetry nerd or someone who has consumed it, there's something to get out of it. And all of its secrets, if you will reveal themselves. Another thing I was taught that a poem is a language game. And so each poem is built like a game. You can play with the poems and uncover new things. But for example, the second poem in the book is called Incident Report. And when I was assaulted at Brown, I had to fill out this incident report. And one of the lines go, I misread affiliation as affliction. And so that's a moment in the book when the speaker is starting to let you know that, listen, I'm misreading words. I'm saying things. But then later on in the book, there are other devices that crop up, like, I found in violence a voice. And you can't spell the word violence without the word voice. Or nature's an allegory in which the ego hides. The word ego is inside the word allegory. Or there's this part that goes like, when will I stop wishing for the if in the middle of life? And you can't spell the word life without that. And so the speaker who has begun to see things is going to see words in words, is going to see all these anagram stuff. And I hope that it teaches the reader how to read the book. And even there's, now I'm just getting really nerdy and telling you things what I hope you appreciate for all the reviewers, the critical reviewers at home. But there's like a section, there's a line in the poem that goes, ambivalence wasn't indifference. Ambivalence was irreverence. And the book patterns those words. The speaker starts by talking about their indifference, lands on ambivalence. And then in the Judith poem, which comes later, we land on the word irreverence. And it's, listen, a girl spent time putting this together for the comfort of poetry readers and non-poetry readers alike. But that's my belief, that every poem needs to teach us how to read it, and every book needs to teach us how to read it. If it's doing something with language. If it's doing something with the language.
Also, this is such a generous book. Like I've read through it 4 or 5 times since receiving it. Wow, I don't want to know what you think until I could talk to you. And it's a book that keeps opening, I think, in my experience with the text. I keep learning from it each time I return to it, and there's always something new I'm uncovering in the poems, which is such a big thing. You want to do one more question before closing out?
Yes. Yes.
We have a final
Planted question. Yes. Hi.
I really, really loved what you said about like turning the known into the unknown and like flipping the sonnet.
Yeah.
Do you have any other spicy takes on
We're listening carefully. Yeah.
on how, I guess like how restrictive certain forms of poetry are and how you continue to vision, even just like inventing new features.
Yeah. I love that question. And I think all my life, I've been looking for the forms that my dreams can take, that my life can take. And so form has not really been, in ways it's been constrictive. I was told that a kid from my neighborhood would never graduate from high school, that I was lucky if an auntie had a job at the Target and I could work there, or if an uncle had a job at the auto body shop and I could work there. But I had to look for new forms for my life. And so there's a definition of form to me that has very little to do with constraint or containment, but freedom. And whether it's the appropriation of received forms, right? Putting our story into it, making an intervention in that tradition, or the encouragement to invent new ones for ourselves, which I think is something that we do, whether we know it or not, every day. Every choice we make, every route we take, that's a decision to create a new path. And a new path is what? A new form. And so I don't, to answer the question, every poem is its own form. Every poem is its own form because you have deliberately decided what it will look like. You have placed every word down with intention, made every choice with intention. And the practice of that deliberateness and intention in the poem, I think, transfers to the intention we practice in real life. And so I want to reorient the perspective of form as not something to contain us, but something that can set us free, especially if we're in the pursuit of inventing our own.
anything else you want to close with? Or you're-
No, we're gonna do a group situation.
Yeah, so for everyone who has the book. Also, this is the first day the book is in the world. So
I
let's,
know.
let's stop our feet really quickly for that. We're all here celebrating.
But its real birthday is next week. Hashtag supply chain issues. I should not have made that joke. And then Karma said, "Boo," you know, but yes. So this is the water broke today. We're in contraction. And you know, thing will be born next week. Yes.
Tune in. Yeah, share with your neighbors. And then after this recitation, we will applaud Paul. And then will you be signing books after this?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, they'll be signing books over yonder. Will you kick us off?
Flight attendant. Oh, page 58.
58.
Which one?
The
cave.
cave. The cave. Done with darkness, someone had the idea to fashion a lamp from stone, animal fat, flint. They held the lamp in front of them, light no longer behind them, light in front of them, light flickering. Retreating shadows revealed curtains of stalactites, calcite-rich clay, eroded moon milk. Someone had not so much arrived at their destination, but for the time being decided that where they were, where the idea had taken them, where they permitted the idea to take them, where they permitted themselves to be taken, was just as good as anywhere to be. Sometimes that's all there is, this. Then someone had another idea. They ground hematite in an ochre-stained shell. They sucked the pigment into their mouth with a bird bone. They switched the powder back and forth. They became light-headed. Between darkness and light, someone found a wall history had set aside for them. They placed their hand on the wall. They blew paint on their hand. Someone thought, this was the best idea I've had.
Keep it going for Paul, please. That was quite moving. I will not elaborate because you were here with me, so you saw. Thank you so much. Thank you, Paul, so much. Thank you, Sam, so much for being so insightful. And thank you all for being here together with us.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you. Thank you everyone online for being so generous. They left really cute notes. I'll show you. Thank you so much. We have copies of the book at the front, and Paul will sign them right where the flowers are at the back here. So thank you so much.